Hey, welcome to AutoFixPal.com. Today we are going to be doing a catalytic converter on a 2010 Nissan Altima with a 2.5 liter 4-cylinder. First thing you're going to do is remove those two 10mm bolts that are holding the cold air intake tube. $10mm socket right there. I'm using the Bosch PS82 cordless impact wrench, 3/8" drive. Then you're going to remove the engine cover that's held on by three 5mm hex bolts. 5mm hex bolt socket. Now you're going to remove the main power cable for the alternator that's held on by a 12mm nut. As you can see, it's a 12mm socket, so we're going to use that to take that off and get that out of the way, because you're going to take the alternator off of the bracket and slide it to the side. You're going to unplug that connector. That's the control connector for the alternator's regulator. And that is a 10mm for the ground cable that's attached to the alternator bracket. You're going to undo that, and then you're going to stick that 10mm bolt right back into the hole so that you don't lose it. You don't have to put it back there. You can do whatever you want with it, but that's the way I work. Now you're going to remove that 14mm bolt that's holding the alternator, the top of the alternator. What I usually do is take a regular ratchet to break the bolt loose, and then I'll use my cordless ratchet to drive that bolt all the way out. It's just the fastest way in my opinion. 10mm again. And that's for the bracket that holds the wiring harnesses in place. Take that off, slide it to the side. And there's a 10mm bolt that's holding the what is that, the coolant reservoir? Yeah, the coolant overflow reservoir bottle is held in by a 10mm bolt, and then it just slides up out of its bracket. You may have to wiggle it side to side a little bit to get it loose, but it just slides up right out of that bracket right there. And then you have a 14mm on the side of the alternator, the lower portion of the alternator, that you want to take that bolt all the way out. Again, if you're using a cordless ratchet, it's probably a good idea to break it loose with a regular ratchet and then just run it out with the 14mm on your cordless ratchet. Those cordless ratchets don't usually have a lot of torque, and I don't know if they'll have enough torque to break that loose by itself. And you don't want to put too much force on the body of your cordless ratchet trying to break it loose with your cordless ratchet. I mean, you can, and it's doable, but not recommended. So you want to get that alternator out of its bracket. You have to slide it back and forth because it's kind of a tight fit. And then you just get it out of your way, because it is blocking the bolts on the catalytic converter. It was actually the manifold, but it's a one-piece unit, and it's blocking that bolt. The bolt's in the corner. The nuts, actually. Next, you'll want to unplug your air-fuel ratio sensor. It looks like an oxygen sensor, but it's actually an air-fuel ratio sensor on a 2010 Nissan Altimas. I'm not sure which year that Nissan switched to air-fuel ratio sensors, but pretty much all of their cars are air-fuel ratio sensors right now. Next, you'll get a 10mm socket, and you're going to undo the cover for the exhaust manifold, the heat shield cover. You should probably spray that with penetrating oil just a few hours before you start the job, because sometimes those bolts don't come out as easy as they're coming out right now. And don't forget that 10mm bolt on the side at the lower side of that cover. You'll have to stick your hand down there to feel it. You might not be able to see it from the top. 14 millimeter is the size of the nuts that hold the exhaust manifold onto the cylinder head. So get your 14 millimeter and then use your impact gun to take it off, or you can do it by hand if you want. Whatever, you know, whatever works so you can get those nuts off. Most of the time those nuts come off without any issues. I haven't had any problems on any of the older Nissans or newer Nissans getting those nuts off with anything breaking, and that's in the Northeast. They use a specially coated nut so that they will come off easily if needed to be removed. But if they do give you a problem, you may want to, you know, soak it in penetrating oil just to be on the safe side so you don't break anything. Then you'll put one nut back on there so that it holds the manifold in place when you undo the bolts at the bottom. The 16 millimeter, are they nuts? Yeah, the 16 millimeter nuts at the bottom, as you'll see when I lift the car up. Once you undo those, there's a possibility that the manifold could come off of the cylinder head and just fall down, and you don't want that. I mean, it's not going to go anywhere, but it could fall and break something else. You don't want it to break anything. So you're going to take those 3 16 millimeter nuts out. They may not be as good a condition as these are. They may be worn away down to like a 15 millimeter, and you may have to beat something on there. You may even have to heat them up to get them loose. So just, you know, use caution when taking those nuts out at the bottom, because those can break on you. Usually if they're in good condition like these are, you can just take them right out with an impact gun without using any heat. But if they're really rusted and worn away, then you may want to use some heat and an extractor type socket, like a turbo socket, to get those nuts off. And then you're going to undo that bracket right there. It's a 14 millimeter bolt that's holding that bracket for the manifold onto the engine block. You're going to take that nut, you're going to take that bolt out, and then you're not going to reuse it again, because the new manifold does not have a bracket and doesn't require a bracket. As you can see, the bolt has been removed, and now you are ready to go back up top and take this manifold out of the car. So take that nut off that you put on there to keep the manifold from falling down, and then just take the manifold completely out of the car and get ready to swap over your air fuel ratio sensor and your covers. The new manifold does not come with the lower cover for the catalytic converter section of the manifold, as you can see in the picture there. Well, the video, not picture. Take out your air fuel ratio sensor and then swap it over. And through the magic of editing, it's going to just magically appear into the new manifold like that. You may want to spray those 10 millimeter bolts holding the cover on, right there, that cover, with some penetrating oil, and let it soak for a little while before you remove it, because those bolts do break and they break often. So you may want to just order some new bolts for that when you get the catalytic converter, because those are specially treated bolts, so you don't want to just stick any type of bolts in there because they won't last long. Those have a coating on there so that they will last a lot longer than any just, you know, regular mild steel bolt. And I'd probably say about 60% of the time, maybe 70% of the time, those bolts will come right out. The rest of the time they'll just snap off or round the head off. So just be careful when you're taking those bolts out. As you can see, the new manifold does not have a bracket on there or a hold for the bracket. So just, you don't have to put a bracket on it. It's just as simple as that. You don't need it. So swap over your cover, tighten it back up, and get ready to put it back in the car. But don't forget the studs at the bottom. because it does not come with studs. You may want to order new studs just in case, because sometimes those studs can be in pretty bad condition, and you don't want to put any rusty, torn up, nasty looking studs back into your new exhaust manifold and then have them break off on you, a few months later, or break off while you're trying to tighten them up. So just get some new studs if they're in bad condition. And you're gonna need an E10 external torque socket to take those studs out if they're in good enough condition that you don't want to reuse them. You don't need to tighten those studs up that much, just hand tight. I mean, not hand tight, but maybe 10 to 20 pounds is fine to tighten those studs up to. And then you're gonna want to change that gasket right there, the exhaust gasket. Replace that one if it's damaged. Most of the time they're in good condition and you can reuse it, but they're pretty cheap, so you might as well just change it out if you can. If you can't change it out, just reuse it as long as it's in good condition. And you're gonna want to change the exhaust manifold gasket out, the gasket to the head. Here's the part number. Alright, now you can go ahead and put your exhaust manifold back in the car. Make sure you put the studs into the holes of that downpipe, and then put it onto the cylinder head. So the bottom studs, you're going to want to line up with the downpipe, put it in the holes. Doesn't have to be perfect, but you just got to go through the holes. It'll make your job a lot easier when you go to the bottom to tighten it up. Then you can go ahead and tighten up these 14mm bolts, tighten them all the way up. Don't overdo it because you don't want to strip the bolts out or anything like that. I use that thing as much as I can because it puts out a good amount of power. It's not too much power, and it fits into a lot of places, gets a lot of bolts loose, and it does the job. I use it wherever it'll fit. Wherever it will fit and it has the power to remove it, I will use that thing. So just make sure everything is tight. Double check it with the with your ratchet, just to be on the safe side. Don't break those 10mm bolts. They're real easy to break. You can use your little cordless ratchet to tighten those up and just be done with it. And don't forget the 10mm down there at the bottom. Make sure you do not distort that heat shield cover, because if you distort it and bend it up, it's going to be hard to line those bolts back up when you're putting it back together. It should come out easily once you take the alternator out of the way. So you shouldn't have to you shouldn't have to distort that cover and bending it up trying to get it out. It should come out fairly easy. Plug your air fuel ratio sensor back up. Right there on the side, as you can see. Alright, now we're going to put our alternator back in place. What I usually do is there's a little, I don't know how to describe that thing at the bottom, but you'll see in the video there's a little stopper thing in the back of the alternator that the bolt, it's like a bolt in the bottom of the alternator that bolt goes into. It's not a bolt, it's like a nut in the bottom of the alternator that the bolt goes into, and it can slide in and out to take up the slack for the mounting point, because not all of the mounting points are the same size, so that little nut in the back right there can slide back and forth. It doesn't slide back and forth easily, So what I usually do is put the bolt in there like that, and then whack it with a hammer or use an air hammer. But don't mess up your bolt whacking the edge of that bolt with a hammer. You'll want to put a socket on there, a cheap socket that you don't really care about, and then just whack it, and it'll move that nut at the bottom down a little bit so that you can easily get your alternator into the mounting point. Now, as you can see, I'm hitting it with the air hammer on the top. That's a sharp air hammer bit so that it won't really damage the bolt too much. And you can see that it slid down some. So now it's going to be a lot easier for me to get that alternator back into its bracket. See how it's flush now? It wasn't flush before, it was sticking up a little bit. So now that opening is a little wider, and I can put the alternator back into that bracket, well, into the mounting point a lot easier. And as I tighten that bolt back up, it's going to pull that nut at the end, that rounded nut, that sliding nut. It's going to pull it flush. It's going to pull it tight up against the mounting point, back to the way it was. Saves you a little time and aggravation with mounting alternators. Pretty much all alternators are like that. They have that little sliding nut at the bottom. Well, maybe not all alternators, but a good amount of alternators has that sliding nut at the bottom. Alright, so next you're going to put all of the bolts in for the alternator. You're going to put the lower bolts in as you saw I already did. And then you're going to tighten it down, 14 millimeter. But you don't want to tighten it all the way down because you want to be able to move that alternator back and forth a little bit so that you can get the top nut, well, the top bolt lined up. Now you're going to work on putting the serpentine belt back on. Yeah, that belt's worn out. The customer declined to have it replaced, so that's on them if it breaks in the future. Not my problem. We told them about it. Excuse me. So the belt tensioner right there, as you can see the arrow pointing to it, is a 14 millimeter. It's better to do that from the bottom, but I'm doing it from the top so that you can see what I'm doing. It's a lot easier for me to show you how to put it on from the top versus from the bottom through the wheel well. Now, if you're going to do it through the bottom via the wheel well, there's a little side cover that you'll have to take off. Take that little side cover off and you can stick your hand in there and get everything lined up, and you'll have better access to that belt tensioner as well. It looked easy in the video, me installing that belt, but it took a lot of time to get that belt installed from the top, and you can see that belt's in very bad condition. Normally I would do it from the bottom. So don't forget to tighten everything up on that alternator. Make sure they're nice and snug, and make sure you tighten that bottom ball up sufficiently so that it pulls that nut through and tightens up against that mounting point nicely. Put your reservoir back. Basically just reverse everything that you did when you took it apart. Make sure you get that coolant reservoir into the slot. Otherwise it'll be flopping around in there and it'll probably be rubbing up against the alternator, and you don't want that. So from here, the only thing left is to put the wiring back onto the alternator, bolt to ground strap up, plug in the connectors, tighten up the main power bolt for the alternator, that 12 millimeter nut right there. Put your engine cover on and clear the DTCs if you have any in there for P0420 for for catalytic converter inefficiency. or if you're changing the exhaust manifold for a crack, because sometimes those manifolds crack, then you probably don't need to clear any codes. But then again, if you do have a crack in it, you probably do have a DTC as well. So just make sure you clear your check engine light out and put everything back together. Put the cold air intake tube back on, put your engine cover on with the 5mm hex bolts, and then you will go to the bottom of your car and tighten up the downpipe to the manifold. Now if you did it correctly, it should already be lined up, and all you'll have to do is put your nuts on and just tighten them up with the 16mm socket and an extension. And that's it. There's an example of a good waveform and a bad waveform. As you can see, that shut out really fast. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please subscribe, like, comment, and let me know what you think about the video.